Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Dave Albert. In this show, I talk about technology, building a company as a CTO and co-founder, and have guests to discuss their roles in technology and entrepreneurship. Today, I'm joined by Dermot Casey, a venture lead at the NDRC Accelerator program that I'm a part of, and he was the CTO and COO of Storyful before they were acquired. Thanks for joining me, Dermot. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Dave.
Is there anything in your bio that you think is very relevant?
Well, I suppose I just had a variety of roles before joining NDRC. I started out as a developer, writing code, and then started managing developers, and then started running projects, and what now people would think of as sort of program management type roles. Then went from a very large organization, which was GE with 350,000 people, into a startup with two, which was Storyful, which we built up over a number of years, up to 35 people when I left. Subsequently, that was sold to News Corp. And then spent 3 years doing consultancy with a mix of startups and SMEs and larger organizations before joining NDRC.
Cool. How long have you been here at NDRC?
Almost 3 years. So it'll be 3 years in January.
Nice. How many cohorts of startups have you been through?
How many cohorts? So we did 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I suppose 7... Yeah, so it's about 7 cohorts of companies and that I've worked with directly, and a couple of others that I've interacted with. So we've added additional programs in Galway, Waterford and Oman as well over the last few years.
Cool. So for a startup that was going to come in to the NDRC, what are some of the things that you wish that people approaching knew beforehand?
What do I wish? So it's probably less what they know, but more of where they are and what their plans and expectations are. I think it's a startup is a very different type of company to a corporate or a traditional sort of business. And I think for anybody who's coming out of that environment, who's coming out of a corporate environment, that they have reset their expectations. So it is a, in a startup environment, particularly at the start with a couple of co-founders, you'll be doing everything. You'll be involved in everything, and that's everything from making the tea and wondering where the toilet paper is, to making strategic decisions about who you're going to partner with, and fundamental decisions about the architectures of your product and your customers. And sometimes you'll be going from one to the other. So it's a very, very different environment to sort of traditional environments as an employee. So I think it's that people are aware and set their expectations around that and understand the challenges that are actually involved. I think one of the key things for us when we're looking at ventures, looking at companies, is that we have founders who are coachable, who can take feedback. It doesn't mean that they're not highly opinionated and very strong-willed. That kind of goes without saying, but that they can listen to and take on advice and figure out what elements of that advice are most relevant and most important for their business. I think there's some of the key things that's important, and understand what we're trying to do in terms of an accelerator. It's all focused on, how we can help them drive their business forward. And it's essentially about learning faster. I talk to people and say, look, what I try and do in NDRC is I try and compress into sort of 4 or 5 months what it took us, 18 to 20 months to do in Storyful. And it's really, it's just learning some of those lessons faster and adapt, making some of those adaptations that you need to make faster, and then ideally setting your trajectory forward so that if you come out of the accelerator, that your velocity has increased as an organization, and you keep it up that trajectory. So it's not that, you come to the end of an acceleration program and you're finished. It's just that you're moving in the right direction at the right speed.
That's our session with the NDRC's actual mentoring part, that was over 18 months ago. And really, it never feels like we're beyond the starting line. So it's like we finish a load of work and it's like, all right, now we're finally ready to start this part.
Yeah.
And I could definitely, from my own experience, say that the different roles that you have to fill as a founder or a co-founder in my case are definitely more diverse than I may have expected.
Yeah.
Doing the actual payroll personally is odd for me.
Yeah.
What do you think that people who have been accepted to accelerators could do to get even more out of their time?
So you have a variety of people, and you have like a very, very diverse variety of people on any program. And you know, there's this view of startups as, you know, 20 somethings with hoodies. You know, we've had people in their 30s, 40s, 50s and 60s on accelerator programs, and people are across the whole piece that have all raised significant sums of money and are all driving their business forward. So I think it's to maximize it is it really about being open. It's about being open to the experience of working across a cohort. It's about being open to mentoring. It's about being open to being wrong about some of the assumptions you're making about your business. Every business makes poor decisions. Every business makes wrong assumptions. You know, they're going to shift and change. And the faster you can figure those things out, the faster you can learn essentially from your customers. You're learning most from your customers. The faster you can actually start to grow and actually scale that business and stop being a startup. I mean, the whole purpose of what we do is not so that you continue to be a startup. Is that you actually turn this into a business and you actually start to scale up that business into something that's self-sustaining. So you can actually hire somebody, to look after the payroll and the coffee and the toilet paper. And, you can actually then focus on the other bits and pieces. Yeah,
that will be good when we get to the stage where somebody else could deal with the payroll. So, well, on with the openness.
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't know that it's a fact, but it seemed like during the process, there's a bit of trying to put on your best face all the time, of the participants, not of the mentors, but that I think a lot of people that were in startups that were being mentored might have felt a little bit like they couldn't show too much weakness, which without the openness can make it harder because you have to put the best foot forward to try to get the funding to process. So do you believe that's true? Do you think there are things we could do to help others avoid that?
Yes, I think people, so sometimes the relationship is, so people essentially are trying to show that, you know, everything's, you know, things are going well and, you know, we're helping here. One of the things I say to companies I'm working with is the sooner you tell me something's wrong, the sooner I can help you fix it. And the longer it takes, the worse it just gets.
Yes.
So, I once described some part of what we do is sort of psychotherapy for startups. And it is that piece of, it's not weakness. It's, you know, look, I don't have all the answers to every problem I face. I've a set of colleagues who have a really diverse set of experiences who can bring their experiences to bear, whether that's our leadership team or our, you know, some of my other peers. Sometimes it'll be some sort of, you know, it's being able to reach out and work with other people. So it's not so sometimes people get the impression it's school, right? It's not school. This is life.
Yes.
You know, you're running a business. Everybody wants that business to succeed. Not all the businesses are going to succeed. So if you can find out quickly that it's not going to succeed, you're better off figuring that out and moving on and doing something else.
Or even pivoting.
Yeah. Pivoting quite often is a way of, just saying that, something just didn't work, right? And there's an interesting post recently from, on the AVC blog about that, pivot or fail. There's some really good examples of businesses that pivot. For most businesses, either it's business or something really close or generally in the same ballpark as a business it starts out with, will it be the business that they build or it won't work out? It's great in theory to say that, well, we'll pivot into something else. And if you're Slack and you've pivoted out of one thing into something that's radically different, that sounds great and sounds fantastic. But we tend to focus on these really huge, very specific examples of it works in one case rather than the more general case. Look, this idea didn't work. That's, you need to go on and do something else, whether that's with the same team or it's with a different team. That depends and can change.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand that. I do know that we actually were working on one product before we decided to focus on Medit.
Yeah.
But that was very early stages. It was long before we ever applied to NDRC.
I think there's a difference between figuring out what your product is and who your customers are and really understanding that piece and, pivoting your business into something that's, we're doing a video game and now we're actually doing a photo sharing piece of software, which is essentially what happened with Flickr, which was, that was a pivot.
Yeah.
Right? But for most companies, it's not. It's really about figuring out, where there's some customer value and actually trying to pursue that value into a business.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good point, is that people do need to understand the difference, that finding the right product fit for the company and team is not necessarily what everyone means when they say pivot. So
yeah.
Cool. Let's see. So what are some of the, well, you've mentioned mistakes before, but what are the biggest mistakes that are really surprising that you've seen?
So the biggest mistakes. So I think mistakes are sort of fairly common. It's not understanding what the customer values is one thing. So it's not actually doing that early stage discovery process properly. It's getting locked in and fixed into an idea in your head, which is a variation of the same piece. It is, not understanding what the value of your product is. If it's something, if you're creating something that's quite valuable, go out and figure out how to charge significant amounts of money for things. A lot of startups tend to think, well, if I can, if it's really cheap, it'll be great. But really cheap doesn't necessarily mean that it's you're going to build a real big business out of the back of it. And from an investment perspective, well, if something's going to be a $5 rather than 5,000 euros, well, that's great. Well, I need to find 1,000 more customers then to be able to sell, to make the same revenue as I would make with one customer I can sell to. So there's a whole series of sort of assumptions and sort of challenges that face startups, and they seem to crop up over and over again. It's really understanding the customer mindset, getting locked into their own ideas about the sort of the preciousness of their idea or the preciousness of their vision for something, and not being able to deal with the reality, and then really not understanding value and how to charge for that value. And a lot of startups can be strangely scared to ask for money. I found this a number of times where it's going out and ask for it. It's it seems like a simple thing, but if people don't come from a background where they're used to doing that, if somebody's coming in from come from a technical role or come from a marketing role, they haven't had that proper sales experience before, it can be challenging to understand, well, what's it worth and how to actually ask for that money as well.
Cool. What would be some advice you would give to someone who was preparing to pitch to the NDRC?
So we asked them to structure something, and we have some details up on our website on ndrc.ie about if you've been offered a pitch. And that advice is useful when you're just thinking about your business at all. So we talk about a grab, we talk about, why should we pay attention to this, right? So, and we have different ways of grabbing people's attention. We ask people to talk about the problem they're solving. Why is this an important problem for the customer? We ask them to talk about their solution, and the solution may be at different stages of development. We've had people come in with really, really detailed amounts of development work done. We've had people come in with light amounts of development work done, very little, but they have an approach, some sort of way that they're actually going to solve the problem. We look at the market and the opportunity. Understand, is there a large market here? Is there a large opportunity? So our focus is on creating a sustainable supply of globally scalable startups coming out of Ireland. That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
We're looking for companies that will we can help get to product market fit, which is that they're starting to get that early traction with their customers and get those early sales on board in a very defined way, and companies that we will be able to get to seed investment. To get that seed investment, you need to be solving an important problem in a large enough market for investors to be willing to put money onto you, whether that's angel investors or whether it is VCs. And there has to be an opportunity to scale that business up. So even if you don't have all the detail, tell me why there's an important problem in a large enough market, and you have some way of actually attacking that market, and then some idea of who this team is. So every stage of a startup development is about de-risking. So I'm trying to understand what the risks are at the stage the company's at right now.
Okay. Interesting. So as a technical early employee yourself and in a leadership role, what were some of the early challenges that you were surprised by that you had to overcome?
I thought I was going to write code, right?
I understand that. I review more code than I actually write anymore.
We ended up hiring people to write code, and then we ended up bringing a team on board, starting with Paul Watson, who later became CTO, and then is now CTO in Kinsen, again with Mark. So I think it was just a variety of things that needed to be done. And the variety of challenges. But I suppose the whole thing is, when I started at that point, what I didn't know about starting a business would fill volumes. And it's, there's an old joke about, an American tourist pulls over in the middle of Kerry and asks the locals, how do I get to this location? And the tourist says, the Kerry man thinks about it for a second and says, geez, I wouldn't start from here. With what I know now, you go back and you think about it again, you'd approach certain things in very, very different ways, and you'd do things, you test, we test stuff much more rigorously, test it much more rapidly, be absolutely ruthless about how you spend money, be absolutely ruthless with things that are not working. And if there's not working, you kill it really, really quickly. It's not that we were fluhuluk and we were wild about how we did things, but there's a lot of skills, and there's a lot of sort of frameworks and things you can use to help you build and grow your business, and to figure out if it's going to grow into a business. So I think that was a learning for me. I did an MBA a number of years ago, and what I tell people is I've actually done 2 MBAs, right? I've done the one that gives me the piece of paper, and then I've done a starting a business from scratch MBA, which gives you a very, very different insight into, and it's, when you're trying to figure out how to make sure that every month you're going to be able to pay 30, 35 people, it gives you a very, very different insight into how business works.
Well, when you started scaling up the team, the technical team specifically, what sort of advice would you give somebody else as they were entering that phase?
hire good people and get out of their way is an element of it. With a small team at the start, you need people who are generalists, because they're going to be cutting across multiple bits and pieces. As a business scales up, or you actually then start to look at start to need more sort of specialist type skills, and different roles and so on. And as the business itself grows, you actually start to move. So once you've gone past 10, 12 people, the business itself actually starts to change. Once you hit 15 people, you actually need to put different structures and frameworks in place to run the business, not just the technical part, but the whole of the company. And similarly, as you get to 30 people, again, you need to put more formal processes and things in place. It's not that you need to turn it into a machine bureaucracy, but you actually need to put some more structure in place to let the business operate properly. So similarly with when you're hiring technical people at the start, it's really about, right, can I get really good people who believe in what we're doing, because that's key in a startup. Because there's an element of this that it's not just a job; it has to be mission oriented, and that's not about making sure that everybody works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's about making sure that their mindset and about the decisions they're making is the right mindset as much as anything else. Occasionally, you'll be working long hours and long days and so on. That happens too. And because one of the things I wasn't thinking of at the very start is that you're actually setting the culture of the organization. You're actually, as you hire people, you're actually creating the culture for the organization. And you have to do that. Actually, my view is you have to do that with intent from the start.
Yes, definitely.
Well, what kind of organization do I want?
Yes.
And what kind of people do I want? So, even if somebody is, maybe really talented, if they're an asshole, you don't hire them.
Yes, absolutely. That was one of the very first things Julie and I laid down.
Yeah.
Was our 3 rules. No assholes. People have to leave everything and everyone better than they found them. Yeah. And then people need to stay curious. Yeah. Yeah, look, and then they're good rules and values to have. But I think it's it's to start thinking about making some of that piece explicit as from the start. And I think very early on, you're under so much pressure and so much strain that you're not thinking about that as you move to the next stage. And one of the challenges as a company takes on money is that you go almost from not spending any money because you don't have it, to not spending any money because you've gotten to the mentality of not spending any money. So it's not that you waste it and you throw it around once you have it. And then there's a danger of people taking on funding that they do that as well and they spend it poorly. But one of the mental shifts for companies is, well, actually, no, you actually do need to hire somebody who's an operations person to look after the payroll and this and this and this, because you now have a team of 8 people over here and a team of 7 people over here, and you need to take care of all of those bits and pieces, and you need to understand what's going on across the organization. Okay. I'm just processing what you're saying there. Silence isn't great for a podcast, but
I can edit it out. It's okay.
It's really good information. Let's see. So if you were to create a startup yourself at this phase, what would be the very first thing you would do?
The very first thing I would do?
Yeah.
The first thing I would do is make sure I had, I had something that was going to create value for a customer. Right? And do it in a large enough market and ideally find customers who have large enough, big pockets and can afford to pay for a product. So, I have a bias towards people who are solving important problems in one of the things I've said, and I need to write a blog post on this sometimes, is send me your boring startups. And by boring startups, I mean people who are doing things that are, infrastructure work in the back end of things that people don't consider, but that they understand this business really, really well, and they understand the value to large corporates. If I fix so one of our companies, Horace, is looking at looking at equipment failure in plant and rooms, and looking at preventative maintenance and so on. And it's not that sexy consumer facing app, right. But it's a really big problem.
Yeah.
And if you can solve that problem, there's a lot of customers out there with money who will actually pay to do that.
Yes.
So to me, it's finding problems like that. And finding problems that are important enough, and have enough customers out there who will actually pay for them. Company I came across recently is doing, essentially is working with warehouses and solving problems in warehouses for companies. And, they're going to charge probably in the region of $500,000 per customer. One of their customers is 36 warehouses. That's 18 million turnover from one customer. That's an interesting business, right?
Definitely.
And it's, and I think it's trying to see through that and understand how that will actually scale up, and understand whether it's defensible. And I think the defensibility of a business varies. Like any business that is involved with technology, ultimately somebody will be able to copy that technology at some level. But can you move fast enough to create a relationship with your customers then to enable you to build and scale out on the back of it? And I think that's a key part for to outside businesses that are IP based, where they have unique intellectual property. I think that's the best, and that's the best way to approach it.
Okay. So with everybody knows startups are hard. I don't think everybody knows that they're even harder than you can ever possibly imagine. Is there any advice you have for those going through it on how to deal with that difficulty?
I think mental and physical health is really important. I think we underrate these things. I think so. You need outlets away from what you're doing. Whether that means hiking up a hill on a weekend, or going to the gym for an hour every morning, whatever it is. You need people whose advice you can trust, whether that's friends and families or peers or mentors or wherever else. So almost create a personal board of advisors, as a founder, independent necessarily from the board of advisors for your startup or your board of directors for the company. Actually, have people out there who are who you can go to and pick the brains of. Even Mark Zuckerberg is turning to Bill Gates for advice. If somebody at that level is turning to somebody still at this point in their career after building a multi-billion business, then I think it's important for all of us to do that. And understand your own limitations, and understand your own blind spots, so that you can so somebody who's a really charismatic, brilliant founder may not be detail oriented, so can you bring in someone detail oriented to fill in all those bits and pieces with you. So it's understanding what the gaps are across and how you need to fill those. But I think it's hard to truly understand how hard it is until you've lived it. Yeah, and I definitely think that. Obviously, physical and mental are connected. So the better your physical health, the easier it is to have mental health. But I think there's even less of a recognition of how important mental health can be within the startup world, because so much of it is very alpha in a lot of instances. And so it's downplayed just how hard it can be on your mental health. I think that's changing a little bit, but I just wrote a blog post called "Killing John Wayne" for an event I'm going to down in Kong next weekend, and it actually deals and touches on some of that, right? So it is this piece about never show any weakness, be the alpha male, you can get through anything, and it's, it's whether it's John Wayne or whether it's Superman or whether it's Batman, it's, just push through it. Yes, the reality is that just doesn't work.
It does not work. You don't get good work out of yourself or your team.
No.
You're just delaying an inevitable crash, whether that's the business or not is one thing, but a crash in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it can be profoundly damaging in the business environment as well when somebody is exhausted. Somebody gets exhausted and people regularly get burnt out and challenged. Look, it's going to be tough. One of the things I talked about is at the start, it's very hard to have any sort of work-life balance in a startup environment. You are sacrificing something for a period of time to build something, but that can't continue. There comes a point in time in which you actually have to shift that environment. If it goes on for too long, you'll destroy yourself as a person. Des Traynor talked about this, about understanding that shift as well. Something he wrote, I think, last year. So, you see this coming out again and again. I think one of the things we need to do is we need to talk about that. And men are generally really awful about talking about
Agreed.
The emotional side of things, talk about emotionally constipated, but we don't have the language, we don't have the tools, we're not taught that. So I think, it's something that's important for us to learn and to talk about.
Have there ever, so there are speaker series throughout the NDRC period. Has there been any speakers that were from a psychology background to maybe help founders understand?
Not specifically from a psychology background, and I suppose that would be an interesting piece. I'm not even sure if psychologists. And now I'm going to have to go off and look this up. Have any psychologists actually studied the psychology of startups? Right?
That's interesting.
Which would be an interesting piece in itself. I think what we've tried to do is bring in founders who are candid and truthful about, with Gavin for iCabby, who was in recently, and he's talking again this evening at Startup Grind. He talked about the challenges that they had as they were attempting to find essentially a strategic partner for the business, which is what happened with Renault. Essentially the parent company, Renault Nissan, bought out 75% of iCabby. Oh. But he describes that the 2 years in that process was going on, and they weren't the preferred, but they weren't the bidder until right to the end. They had a couple of other people on board that essentially they neglected the business. Not ignored it and everything else, but a lot of what they would want to do with product and everything else ended up not getting done because they were so busy in trying to figure out the financial piece and figure out, how they're going to bring a strategic partner or have an exit out of that business, which they've now done. And, they're going to add another 100 people to that business over the next couple of years. There's a significant amount of money is going to be put into it. But the challenge in actually doing that. And we've had people come in and talk, and we've run a series of posts, and Gordon, who's our communications officer, has run and done a series of blog posts with a couple of our companies who haven't made it. So some of them who have failed before raising, some of them who have failed even after raising seed investment, because raising seed investment is not the guarantee of success, right? Yeah. It's an oxygen tank. The oxygen tank has to get you to your next. It's like climbing Everest, has to get you to the next base camp, and then you need to figure. You either need oxygen there from finances, or you need to bring in some more, and it can be difficult to do. In fact, actually, at one stage after. When I saw the movie, I don't know if you've seen the movie Everest.
No, I haven't.
I thought every startup should sit down and actually take a look at it, right? And think about it as a metaphor for the startup journey. Okay, not everybody makes it back alive.
Yeah.
And even those who do don't make it with all their fingers and their toes. So it's tough, and it's not, and it isn't for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's with the trend of everybody finding it cool.
Yeah.
It's definitely harder. It's harder than you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
It's also the amount of growth I've had, regardless of what happens, I'm a million times more valuable as a developer, as a team leader, feels like as a person from this experience. It's not like anything else that I've ever seen. And, I'm getting on in my career. I'm not one of those young hoodie wearing gents, but but
I think, it's the ability to learn, right? If you don't have that, you're not going to make it.
No.
And there's a framework I've used. I've taught on MBA programs and things as well, and I've used this framework a number of times. Sort of Simon Wardley, who's he was CEO of Canonical at one point, and a strategic thinker, and he talks about pioneers, settlers, and town planners. Oh, yeah. Pioneers are people who are pushing out the boundaries and starting new things. Settlers are the people who are sort of harvesting value from things, and town planners are those who are efficiency. Pioneer, early stage startup. Into settler is where you want to be scaling as a company. Town planner is your large corporate environment. Different people are suited to working in, so all organizations, ultimately a large organization should have different types of people in it. So as you, and this is one of the challenges, even for startups as they grow and scale, is they lose that pioneering spirit, right? They lose that as they become more corporate. So it's just why so many companies go and they acquire startups in the first place, because they're acquiring that pioneer piece, and then the pioneers leave because they can't stand the culture. So different people work better in those, in the pioneering environment. Different people work better in a settled environment, and different people work better in those efficiency sort of large corporate environments. Yep. And it's really understand. I spent a lot of my career over here in the large corporate environment, and then went into the much earlier environment, and realized that it was somewhere between there and the edge of that into the settled piece that a lot of my talents and a lot of things I'd done were not just most useful, but it was stuff I was most interested in, where I could bring a huge amount of impact and value.
Cool. So back on the you mentioned the advisors. How, after programs like this, what tips can you give to people to help find other advisors and mentors that maybe aren't within the network of people they already know?
As in finding, is this looking at specific skills, or is this looking at sort of general?
Just kind of in general, how you might go about finding, or what sort of tips you might have on. So
I think it's start with the network that you have. So in an accelerator here, you've got a specific environment. You've got a series of advisors, mentors, but you've also got people here are connected into an awful lot of other large networks. So you're sort of your 1 degree, 2 degree of separation from most people in the country, and a lot of people internationally. Yeah. So I think you can leverage that. The other side of it is look at places that the types of people you want to get advice from hang out. Are that and it may not be in your. So a lot of people like to go to startup events, and there's there are a value. There can be some value to those, but I think for a lot of people, once you've started, you're creating a business. Go to places that your customers are. Go to places that your suppliers are. Maybe go to textile events. If you find somebody that you want to talk to, reach out to them as a starting point. And if you're going to establish a relationship, understand what that relationship is. Is it, if you want somebody to advise you, what's in it for, there has to be something in for them. So on the business show at the weekend on RTE, they were talking about going for growth mentoring program established in conjunction with Enterprise Ireland. Louise Phelan, who's CEO of PayPal, was talking about with and there was a CEO of a company called Waxperts on. So Louise had actually taken on a mentoring role with that CEO. And she'd done it through the program. So they'd established the relationship through that program. Okay. But somebody, so there's a mechanism by which that engagement starts, and then there's something that somebody's getting out of it. So in some cases, it may be somebody wants to give back. So somebody wants to give back and they want to give some of your time to your company. That's great. If they don't, if they're only available for hire, then find out, is this somebody you want to hire to spend some time with you? And do you have the funds to actually, to do that as well? So you figure out what the relationship is, figure out, how that's going to work, and just be really, really clear.
Sure.
As to how that will work and go forward.
Clarity and honesty usually works out better than anything else. What gaps in our discussion here do you think that I've left?
Gaps in our discussion. Haven't talked anything about technology, right?
That's true.
But that's okay.
Well, that's okay. From a technology standpoint, what are some of the things that people don't focus on early enough or focus on too early?
So don't focus on early enough is, so I've seen mistakes where founders think they can step away from the product. So I'm the commercial founder, or I'm the CEO. I'm not the technical founder, so I don't need to worry or think about the product, right? And that's a killer in a small startup at the start. You absolutely need to know and you need to understand the product inside and out. You don't need to write all the code. You need to understand the product. And I've seen companies fail. So one company that raised $1.5 million, not in NDRC, spend and blow through most of that money without building a product, and got called in to take a look at it. It was a number of years ago, and so you look at the immediate cause and the problems on the technical side and being badly led and all the challenges and so on that were going on. But the ultimate underlying problem is the CEO is over here doing CEO strategic stuff and really not owning that piece. Sure. And the CEO needs to own that piece. The other side, the flip side of it is actually building too much too quickly. Right. So, and building without proper customer insight and customer validation of what you're actually trying to do. And there are different types of businesses. You need to build things at different stages. So, we focus particularly at the start on a lot of the customer discovery work and really understand, even if somebody's come in with a product and has customers on board, go back and do it again. Really make sure you understand that value proposition, understand why the customer values this, what they value, and how they're acting, and demonstrate they're going to be willing. Somebody's going to be willing to pay for some of that value somewhere along the line. As you build out the iterations of your product, you get a different level of insight, and it's to not stop that discovery piece as you build more and more of your product. And I've seen that with a number of our companies over the last few years, where as they build out stuff, they get a much richer, deeper layer of insight with their customers. And the ones that do that well tend to be the ones that progress those businesses further and better. That's
from the time that we actually got the app into people's hands, our understanding got so much better, and everything about the application it continues to improve at a rate that far surpassed my expectations, because we're basing all our decisions on behavior of the users and more understanding. And that's I mentioned in the last interview I did with someone about, I get asked all the time by non-technical people, how can I go build this thing? And it's, as a technical person, my actual first answer is don't build it yet. Go talk to customers. That's when we got here to the NDRC, we had a good understanding of our customers and users. But after we started the program and got a little bit more training in how to perform better customer interviews, we learned a lot that I wish we'd known before I wrote the first line of code. So if I ever do this again, I'll be the one demanding that we don't write any code for quite some time until we've spoken to people and really, really understand.
Like there's elements of anthropology, sociology, and ethnography in everything you do to build a product and to build it really, really well. Although we don't always use those terms, I think that's essentially what we're doing. We're trying to really, really get close and intimate and understand the behavior. And it is, it's not about shifting that behavior. Mm-hmm. It's figuring out how we can use existing behaviors. As a friend of mine, Dermot Daly, runs one of the top app development companies in the country called Tapadoo. And he says, you're not going to change the user. Right? Nope. You have to understand how they behave, why they behave that way, and then you need to piggyback on the back of that behavior, and really understand that piece.
That's very good advice. All right. Is there anything else that you think we should throw in here before we wrap up?
Not off the top of my head. Okay. I'm sure there's probably a million things I'll think about 30 seconds after I leave the room.
We could always do this again if you're interested. Okay, then. Well, thank you very much for joining me.
You're very welcome.
It's been a pleasure, as always, talking to you, and I'm sure it was useful for anyone who listens. So,
good. Brilliant.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Until next time, remember, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.